Rain slicked the Manhattan streets, turning the asphalt into a black mirror, reflecting a city that never slept, only blinked. Leo, a bike messenger with lungs like bellows and legs coiled of steel, felt the cold seep through his thin jacket. He was a ghost in the machine, a vital, invisible part of the city's circulatory system. Tonight, though, felt different. The air was heavier, the shadows deeper. His final pickup was at the St. Regis, not the usual grubby office or downtown loft. He leaned his beat-up Trek against the polished marble of the hotel lobby, feeling the stares of the doorman like tiny needles. A man detached himself from a plush armchair. He wasn't rich, not in the way the hotel's guests were. His suit was expensive, but off the rack, his face a blank slate. He was the kind of man designed to be forgotten. "You, Leo?" the man asked. His voice was flat, devoid of accent or emotion. "That's me." The man placed a briefcase on the floor between them. It was black, heavy, and secured with a combination lock. No clasps, no keyholes. "You will deliver this to 11140 Riverside Drive, apartment 4B. You will not stop. You will not be late. You will not, under any circumstances, open this case. Do you understand?" Leo shrugged, feigning a boredom he didn't feel. The weight of the case was substantial. "Yeah, I get it. One ride, one drop. What's in it? Bricks?" The man's eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, showed a flicker of something. Annoyance? Warning? "It's none of your concern. The fee is $500, half now, half on delivery." He slid a thick envelope into Leo's hand. "Don't be late." Leo hefted the briefcase. It was easily 30 pounds, an awkward dead weight. He strapped it to the rear rack of his bike, the bungee cords groaning in protest. As he pedaled out into the downpour, the man's words echoed in his ears. "Don't be late." He checked the address on his phone. Upper West Side, a long, wet hall. He merged into traffic, a red and white blur in a sea of yellow cabs. The city was a symphony of chaos he knew by heart. He could predict the cabbie's swerve, the pedestrian's step off the curb, the opening car door. But tonight, the rhythm felt off. A black SUV, a Cadillac Escalade, stayed 2 cars behind him. It could be a coincidence. In New York, it was always a coincidence, until it wasn't. He took a sharp left down a one-way street, cutting through an alley to shave a minute off his time. The Escalade followed, its engine a low growl that didn't fit the sleek vehicle. It wasn't trying to catch him, it was hurting him. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the city's drone. This wasn't a simple delivery. This was a test or a trap. He pushed harder, his thighs burning. He shot through an intersection just as the light turned red, horns blaring behind him. The Escalade couldn't follow. It had to wait. Leo saw his chance. He veered east, then north, trying to lose himself in the labyrinth of the West Village. He glanced over his shoulder. The SUV was gone. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Maybe he was just spooked. $500 could do that to a guy. He was approaching the West Side Highway, a clear shot north. The briefcase felt like a lead anchor behind him, a physical manifestation of his growing dread. He was just about to merge onto the ramp when he saw it. The Escalade. It was waiting for him, pulled over to the side, its engine idling. It hadn't been chasing him. It had cut him off. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through him. He slammed on his brakes, the bike skidding on the wet pavement. He swerved, narrowly avoiding a parked car, and plunged into the maze of side streets west of the highway. He was in a warren of old apartment buildings and industrial garages. The streets were narrower here, poorly lit. He was abandoning his advantage, his knowledge of the main arteries. Here, he was just as lost as they were. He risked another look back. The Escalade was there, a predator gliding silently through the gloom. It wasn't rushing. It was patient. It knew it had him. Leo's lungs screamed for air. He saw an alley up ahead, a narrow sliver between 2 brick buildings. It was a dead end, a foolish move. But it was his only move. He veered sharply into it, hoping to find a fire escape, a door, anything. The alley ended in a brick wall, slick with moss and grime. He skidded to a halt, his back wheel lifting from the ground. He was trapped. The entrance to the alley was suddenly filled with the massive, dark shape of the Escalade, its headlights cutting through the rain like twin blades. The engine died. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. A door opened. A figure got out, not the man from the hotel. This one was bigger, broader. He moved with an unnerving smoothness, his shoes making no sound in the puddles. He was just a silhouette against the headlights, a mountain of a man blocking the only way out. The case, the silhouette said. The voice was a low rumble, like stones grinding together. Leo's mind raced. $500. It wasn't worth this. He unstrapped the briefcase, his fingers fumbling with the cold, wet bungee cords. He held it out. Just take it. Let me go. The man stepped forward out of the glare. His face was grim, his eyes empty. He took the briefcase. For a moment, Leo thought it might be over. He might just get to ride away, a scary story to tell. He was wrong. The man moved with a speed that defied his size. One hand shot out, grabbing Leo by the front of his jacket. The other hand came up, not with a gun, but with something thin and metallic that glinted in the faint light. A wire. Leo didn't even have time to struggle. The wire was around his throat, biting deep, cutting off his breath, his scream. He clawed at his neck, his legs kicking uselessly. The world began to fade to gray, then black. His last thought was of the rain and the heavy, empty space where the briefcase used to be. The man lowered Leo's body to the ground, placed the briefcase in the back of the Escalade, and drove away, leaving the rain to wash the blood down the drain. Detective Miles Corrigan knelt by the body, the rain still doing its best to erase the crime. The kid couldn't have been more than 25. A bike messenger. Corrigan had seen it 100 times. A deal gone wrong, a wrong place, wrong time situation. But this felt different. There was a precision to it. The garrote wire was thin, professional. The alley was chosen, not stumbled into. And the victim's bike was there, his wallet was there, but his delivery package was gone. Run the bike's serial number, Corrigan said to his partner, a young detective named Chavez who was still green enough to look pale. Check his phone for his last pickup. I want to know who hired this kid. The investigation hit a wall before it even started. The pickup was the St. Regis, but the man who paid Leo had used a fake name and paid in cash. The hotel's lobby cameras had a convenient 15-minute blind spot over the armchair where he'd been waiting. The Escalade was reported stolen an hour before the murder and found abandoned in the Bronx, wiped cleaner than a surgeon's tools. No prints. No DNA, nothing. Leo's last delivery address, 1140 Riverside Drive, apartment 4B, was a dead end too. The apartment had been vacant for 6 months, owned by a shell corporation based in Panama. The trail went cold. The case of the bike messenger became another file in a cabinet full of ghosts, a whisper of a story about a heavy briefcase and a life extinguished for its contents. Corrigan retired, Chavez moved on, and the city kept breathing, its memory short and its appetite for new endless. 20 years later, the city had changed. Gritty warehouses had become artisanal coffee shops. The beat-up Trek bikes of messengers had been replaced by electric scooters. And in the basement of the Friesprint, Detective Eva Rostova was drowning in paper. Rostova was a lifer, a veteran of the cold case squad. She preferred the dead to the living. The dead didn't lie. They just waited. She was cataloging a backlog of evidence from a major drug bust in the early 2000s when she found it. A large black briefcase with a combination lock. The tag on it was faded, the ink almost gone. It read, Evidence Locker 7B, John Doe, Homicide, 2004. Property, empty briefcase. The case number was familiar. She pulled the digital file. The Courier's last ride. Leo Martinez. She remembered the case. It was one of Corrigan's last, a perfect little locked room mystery, except the room was an entire city. The briefcase was the one thing that was never found. And here it was, sitting in the wrong locker for 2 decades, logged as evidence from a completely different case. A clerical error that had buried the only physical link to the killer. Her heart beat a little faster. This was why she did this. She carried the briefcase to an examination room. The combination lock was rusted shut. She didn't bother with a locksmith. She took a crowbar and a hammer. With 2 sharp, focused blows, she shattered the locking mechanism. The case swung open. It was empty, just as the old report said, empty of money or drugs or whatever it was that had gotten Leo Martinez killed. But as Rostova ran her gloved finger along the black felt lining, she felt it, an imperfection. She angled her desk lamp, the light glinting off something etched into the fabric. It was a symbol, small, precise, and deeply scored into the material, as if by the tip of a diamond. It wasn't a gang sign or a company logo, it was something else, a circle, perfectly rendered. Inside the circle, a jagged, vertical line bisected it, like a bolt of lightning. In the top left segment of the circle, a single tiny dot. Rostova stared at it. It was a message. A signature left behind 2 decades ago, a mistake made by an overconfident killer. They had taken the case, emptied it, and assumed it would never be seen again. They were wrong. She photographed the symbol from every angle, her mind already racing. This wasn't just a clue, it was a name. She just had to figure out how to read it. The cold case of Leo Martinez had just thawed. Rostova worked through the night, fueled by stale coffee and the electric hum of a forgotten case coming back to life. The symbol was her only key. She ran it through every database she had access to. NCIC, the FBI's gang identifier system, Interpol's watch list. She even sent it to a contact at the NSA, who politely told her it wasn't on their radar, which she knew meant either it wasn't a threat or it was a very good one. Nothing. The symbol was a ghost. It wasn't a variation on an alchemical symbol. It wasn't a sigil from any known occult group. It wasn't the logo of a defunct corporation. It was unique, a custom design. That meant it belonged to a small, tight-knit group. Or a single person, a signature. Frustration gnawed at her. She had the murder weapon, the motive, and the killer's calling card, all locked away in a briefcase for 20 years. And now that she had it, it meant nothing. She leaned back in her chair, the leather groaning in protest, and stared at the image on her screen. The circle, the lightning bolt, the dot. It felt like a riddle with no question. Her eyes fell on the original case file, still open on her tablet. The lead detective was Miles Corrigan. She remembered him as a bulldog of a man, relentless until the day he retired. Maybe he remembered something he'd dismissed, a tiny detail that hadn't seemed important at the time. She found his number in the retired employee directory. It took 3 tries before a gruff voice answered. Corrigan. Detective, this is Eva Rostova from Cold Case. I'm sorry to bother you at home. A sigh crackled over the phone. Cold Case means it's dead, Rostova. Let it sleep. Almost, she said, and sent the photo of the symbol to his phone. I just found the briefcase from the Martinez case. It was in the wrong locker. Inside, there's this. There was a long silence. She could hear the faint click of a keyboard. A circle, a line, a dot, Corrigan finally said, his voice losing some of its edge. Doesn't ring a bell. We never found the case. We had nothing. I know, but I was hoping. Was there anything? Anything at all that felt out of place, that you couldn't quite fit? Another silence, longer this time. Corrigan was thinking, reaching back through 20 years of countless other cases. The Shell Corporation, he said slowly. The one that owned the Riverside Drive apartment. We tracked the lawyer who set it up. A real high-priced, slick character. Name was Alistair Sterling. Rostova sat up straight, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Sterling. Yeah. We interviewed him. He had an alibi for the night of the murder. Solid as bedrock. He was at some charity gala, hundreds of witnesses. He claimed he was just a hired gun, that a client paid him to set up the corp through a series of anonymous transfers. He was cooperative, but too cooperative. Smiled the whole time. I always had a feeling he knew more than he was letting on, but we had zero to connect him. No motive, no link to the kid. Nothing. Alistair Sterling, Rostova repeated, typing the name into the system. A picture popped up. A man in his late 50s, with silver hair, a perfect tan, and a smile that didn't reach his cold blue eyes. He was a senior partner at Sterling, Finch & Croft, one of the most powerful corporate law firms in the city. He was legitimate, wealthy, connected. He's still around, Detective, Rostova said. They always are, Corrigan muttered. Good luck, Rostova. Don't let that smile fool you. The call ended. Rostova stared at Alistair Sterling's face. The man from the hotel, the one who hired Leo, was a ghost. The killer in the alley was a shadow. But Sterling was real. He was tangible. And 20 years ago, he had been a thread in the tapestry of Leo Martinez's murder. Now Rostova had to find out if that thread led to the symbol etched into the briefcase. She couldn't just walk into his office and accuse him. He'd lawyer up in a heartbeat, and she'd be back where she started. She needed to get close to see his reaction when he didn't expect it. She checked his public schedule. He was a man who liked his profile high. Charity boards, museum galas, speaking engagements, and then she found it. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Sterling had a standing reservation for lunch at a private club in Midtown. the sort of place that required a membership and a seven-figure annual donation. Rostova smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. She couldn't get inside the club, but she could get to the lobby. And sometimes that was all the room you needed. The lobby of the Aurelian Club was a cathedral of old money. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, dark wood paneling that absorbed all sound, and the faint scent of leather and lemon polish. Rostova, in her off-the-rack trench coat, felt like a smudge on a masterpiece. She didn't belong here, and she counted on it. She took up a position near the grand staircase, pretending to study her phone, but her eyes were fixed on the entrance. She was a predator in a zoo, waiting for the star exhibit to arrive. An hour passed. The concierge shot her curious, then annoyed glances. Rostova ignored him. Patience was a muscle she had built over 2 decades of waiting. Then the doors swung open. Alistair Sterling entered, shaking out a large black umbrella. He was exactly as his picture suggested, but more so. The silver hair was impeccably styled, the suit a flawless charcoal gray. He moved with an easy confidence, a man who owned every room he entered. He handed the umbrella to a doorman and nodded to the concierge. This was her moment. Rostova pushed off the wall and walked directly toward him, intercepting him before he could reach the lounge. Her movements were deliberate, her expression neutral. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice clear and calm. He stopped, a flicker of irritation in his eyes, quickly masked by a practiced, polite smile. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Detective Eva Rostova, NYPD. I'd like to ask you a few questions about a case from 2004. The smile didn't waver, but it became a piece of armor. "Detective, that was a long time ago. If you need to speak to my firm's counsel, you can make an appointment." He moved to step past her. "It's about a bike messenger," Rostova said, her voice dropping slightly, forcing him to lean in. "Leo Martinez." Sterling froze. It was almost imperceptible, a micro pause in his fluid motion, a tiny crack in the facade. His eyes, the same cold blue from the photo, met hers. The smile was gone. "I have no recollection of that name. Now, if you'll excuse me." He tried to brush past her again. Rostova didn't move. She held up her phone, the screen displaying the symbol. She only let him see it for a second, a flash of white lines on a black background. "Does this refresh your memory?" The effect was instantaneous and electric. Sterling's face went rigid. The practiced composure shattered, replaced by a raw, naked fear that was there and gone in a heartbeat. He saw it. He knew what it was. He recovered almost immediately, his jaw tightening, his eyes turning to chips of ice. "That's harassment, detective," he hissed, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "Get out of my way before I have you thrown out." He shoved past her, not roughly, but with a final, dismissive force. He didn't look back. He strode across the lobby and disappeared into the club's inner sanctum, his perfect posture now a little too stiff. Rostova slowly lowered her phone. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She had her confirmation. Sterling wasn't just a lawyer who set up a shell corporation. He was in it up to his neck. The symbol was his key, and she had just shown him that she had a copy. She didn't wait for the concierge to call security. She turned and walked out of the Aurelian Club, the heavy doors swinging shut behind her, leaving the scent of old money and fear behind. She had poked the bear. Now she had to see what it would do. Inside the club, Alistair Sterling didn't go to the bar. He walked straight to the men's room, a quiet, marble-tiled room that smelled of expensive cologne. He checked under the stalls to ensure he was alone. He leaned against the sink, his knuckles white as he gripped the porcelain. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. The calm, confident man was gone, replaced by a pale, frightened imposter. 20 years. He had built an empire on the foundation of that one night. He had buried the secret so deep he'd almost forgotten it was there. And now, a ghost in a trench coat had just dug it up with a single image. He pulled a burner phone from an inner pocket of his suit, a phone he hadn't used in over a decade, but kept for just such an emergency. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed a number from memory. A voice answered on the second ring, a voice like gravel. "Yes." "It's Alistair," Sterling said, his voice strained. "We have a problem." There was a pause on the other end. "Problems can be managed. Not this one. The Martinez case, it's been reopened. A detective, Rostova." Another, longer pause. The silence was heavy with unspoken menace. "And she knows," Sterling whispered. She showed me the symbol. The line went dead. Sterling knew what that meant. The conversation was over. The assessment had begun. He wasn't just a lawyer anymore. He was a liability. And the people he had worked for 20 years ago were very, very good at cleaning up liabilities. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to regain his composure, but he knew it was too late. He wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the prey, and the hunt was about to begin. Rostova didn't go back to the precinct. She drove through the city, the lights of Manhattan blurring into streaks of gold and white. Her mind was racing, replaying the look on Sterling's face. It wasn't just fear, it was recognition. The symbol was a key, and it had unlocked a cage of terror inside a man who thought he was untouchable. She needed to know who he was afraid of. The man on the phone. The person who sent the killer in the alley. Sterling was the middleman, the lawyer who provided the clean, legal facade. But he wasn't the one who called the shots. He was just the first layer of insulation around the secret in the briefcase. Back in her small, sparsely decorated apartment in Queens, Rostova booted up her personal laptop. She uploaded the photos of the symbol to a secure, encrypted cloud server. She then created a new encrypted file titled simply Martinez. She copied every piece of data she had, the original case file, her notes on Sterling, the photo of the symbol, and moved it into the secure drive. She was old school, but she wasn't stupid. Digital ghosts were harder to erase than paper ones. She was making a cup of tea when she felt it. A subtle wrongness. The air in her apartment was too still. She was a creature of habit, and her apartment was her sanctuary. A book on her coffee table was angled differently. The curtain was pulled a half-inch further closed than she always left it. They were tiny details, invisible to anyone else, but to her, they screamed like sirens. Her hand went to the small Glock 26 holstered at the small of her back. She moved silently through her apartment, clearing each room. The bedroom was empty, the bathroom empty, the kitchen empty. Nothing was missing. The TV was there, her laptop was on the table. They hadn't been thieves. She returned to the living room, her eyes scanning every surface. That's when she saw it. On the polished surface of her coffee table, next to the book she'd been reading, was a single, perfect white chrysanthemum petal. It was a message, a calling card. They had been here. They had been in her home, her private space. They could have killed her in her sleep, but they didn't. This was a warning. We know who you are. We know where you live. Stop. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't about a 20-year-old case anymore. This was about now. This was about her. She walked to her bookshelf and ran her finger along the spines. There, tucked between a copy of the Criminal Code and a biography of J. Edgar Hoover, was a small, framed photo of her and her father on a fishing trip from when she was a girl. It was gone. They hadn't taken her laptop or her case notes. They had taken a piece of her life, a piece of her heart. The message was clear. We can take whatever we want. Rage, cold and pure, replaced the fear. They had made it personal. She looked at the single white petal on her table. It was elegant, professional, and utterly terrifying. This was the work of the same person who killed Leo Martinez, the same person who had just been called back into action. She didn't call for backup. She didn't report the break-in. That would play into their hands, bogging her down in paperwork and official warnings. They wanted to scare her off the case. They had just done the exact opposite. She sat down at her laptop, her jaw set. She needed to find the flower. The symbol in the briefcase was the key to the past. The chrysanthemum petal on her table was the key to the present. She pulled up a search engine, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Chrysanthemum symbolism, secret societies, organized crime. Most of the results were generic. In some parts of the world, it was a symbol of death. In Japan, it was the imperial seal. But then she found it, a footnote in an obscure academic journal on corporate espionage, a reference to a defunct private intelligence firm from the late 90s, known only as the Chrysanthemum Group. They were rumored to be a cleanup crew, specialists in erasing problems, corporate or otherwise, with extreme prejudice. They were a myth, a boogeyman whispered about in boardrooms. The journal article had no sources, no proof, just a name. Rostova stared at the screen, the Chrysanthemum Group, the man on the phone, the killer in the alley. It was all starting to connect. Sterling had hired them or worked with them 20 years ago to handle the briefcase, and now they were handling her. She had a name, not a person's name, but the name of the enemy. It was a start. She printed the article, the single petal still lying on her table, as a silent white threat. The hunt was on. But this time she wasn't the only one hunting. Rostova didn't sleep. She packed a go bag, a change of clothes, 3 spare magazines for her Glock, a burner phone, and $1,000 in cash. She placed the single white chrysanthemum petal in a small evidence bag and sealed it. Then she placed the bag in a public locker at Grand Central Station, texting the locker number and combination to her own personal phone from the burner. A dead man's switch. If something happened to her, someone would eventually find it. She was no longer just a detective. She was a target. And she had to think like one. The precinct was no longer safe. Her apartment was compromised. She checked into a cheap motel under a fake name in the Bronx, a place that paid in cash and asked no questions. From a corner booth in a greasy spoon diner down the street, she made a call. It was to a man named Ben Carter, an analyst at FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. She'd helped him out of a jam years ago, a domestic incident that could have ended his career. He owed her one. "Ben, it's Eva Rostova," she said when he answered. "Eva, it's been a while. Is everything okay?" "No," she said, her voice low. "I need a favor, Ben. A deep, dark, off-the-books favor. I need you to look for a ghost." She explained the situation, leaving out the part about the break-in to spare him the liability. She gave him the name Chrysanthemum Group and Alistair Sterling's name, focusing on the time period of 2004. "I need to know if any money moved, any large, anomalous transactions that passed through Sterling's known shell corporations or anything linked to that name." Ben was silent for a long time. "Eva, this is radioactive. If I get caught—" "You won't," she said. "I just need a name, a destination, anything. I'm chasing shadows here." "Okay," he finally sighed. "Give me 12 hours. Don't call this number again. I'll find you." In a pristine, climate-controlled greenhouse in a wealthy suburb of Connecticut, a man named Silas pruned a bonsai tree. His movements were meticulous, precise. He was older, with sharp features and eyes the color of winter sky. He was the voice on the phone. He was the one who had left the petal on Rostova's table. He was the Chrysanthemum Group's chief gardener, and his specialty was pruning problems. His own phone, a simple, untraceable device, buzzed. He answered without looking at the screen. "Report." "The target, Detective Rostova, has gone dark," a voice said on the other end. "She left her apartment this morning, hasn't been back. No credit card activity, no phone pings. She's a ghost." Silas snipped a tiny, perfectly formed leaf from the bonsai. "She's not a ghost. She's a professional. She knows we're watching. She'll be looking for a thread to pull. Find out what she was working on before she disappeared. The Martinez case. What did she find?" "The symbol. She confronted Sterling with it. Then she knows the name." Silas said, his voice flat. "She'll be looking for us, and she'll use the money. They always use the money." He put down his shears. "The warning was a courtesy. Phase 2 is now in effect. I want her found, and I want the case file, her notes, anything she has. Erase her, Ben. Leave no trace." 12 hours later, Rostova's burner phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Old Library, Columbia, main reading room, 3 p.m. Book Moby Dick." Rostova arrived early. She found the copy of Moby Dick on a shelf in the vast, silent room. Tucked inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. She took it and found a secluded Carol, her heart pounding. She unfolded the paper. It was a list of transactions. Ben had found it. A single massive payment of $10 million made on the day Leo Martinez was murdered. The money came from a tech startup called Apex Innovations. The next day, Apex Innovations filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and was liquidated. The $10 million was funneled through Sterling's Shell Corporation, then broken into 100 smaller pieces and sent to accounts all over the world before vanishing. Apex Innovations. Rostova pulled out her tablet and searched the name. The company was a ghost, but its founder was not. A brilliant, reclusive physicist named Dr. Eris Thorne. He had disappeared around the same time his company went under. No obituary, no arrest record. He had simply vanished. Rostova felt a chill. A $10 million payment to a shadowy group on the same day a courier was killed delivering a heavy briefcase. A tech company specializing in what? She dug deeper, searching for old patents, research papers, anything connected to Apex Innovations. She found it, a single, abandoned patent application. It was for a new type of data storage technology, a quantum storage drive, a device no bigger than a pack of cards that could hold the entire contents of the Library of Congress, a device that could render all other forms of digital encryption obsolete, a key that could unlock any secret in the world. The briefcase. It wasn't money, it wasn't drugs, it was the prototype, the only one in existence. And Leo Martinez was killed because he was carrying a key worth more than all the money on Earth. As the realization hit her, a man sat down in the carrel opposite her. He was in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a worn tweed jacket. He looked like a professor. He smiled at her, a gentle, disarming smile. "Fascinating book, isn't it?" he said, nodding at her tablet. "Apex Innovations, a real tragedy. What happened to them? Dr. Thorne was a visionary." Rostova's blood turned to ice. She didn't know him. She had never seen him before. But she knew who he was. The gardener had come to prune. "Silas, I presume," she said, her hands slowly moving toward her bag under the table. His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Detective Rostova, you've been digging in a garden that doesn't belong to you. It's time to put the tools down." "Dr. Thorne didn't want to sell," Silas continued, his voice a low murmur that was somehow louder than a shout in the silent library. "He believed his invention would change the world for the better. A naive man. Our client disagreed. The Courier was a message. Thorne was the cleanup." "The prototype," Rostova said, her hand resting on the strap of her bag. "You've had it for 20 years. A useful tool," Silas conceded. "But it's failing. The quantum state is degrading. We need Thorne's original research notes to stabilize it. Notes we believe you are now looking for. Your investigation has become an inconvenience, detective." He moved to stand, his motion fluid and predatory. "This is your only chance. Walk away. Forget the symbol. Forget the flower. Forget Leo Martinez. He was a ghost. You can be one too." Rostova didn't move. "Leo Martinez wasn't a ghost," she said, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the library's hush. "He was a kid on a bike who was murdered for a briefcase, and you're the man who killed him." A few students looked up from their books, annoyed by the disruption. Silas's eyes narrowed. He had misjudged her. She wasn't going to be quiet. "His name was Leo Martinez," Rostova said, louder this time, pushing her chair back and standing up. "And this man, Silas, is the head of the Chrysanthemum Group, a corporate assassination squad." Heads turned. A gasp from a nearby carrel. Silas was exposed, a creature of the dark suddenly thrust into the light. Panic flashed in his eyes. He lunged across the table, not for Rostova, but for her tablet. Rostova was ready. She kicked her chair back into his shins, sending him stumbling. As he recovered, she swung her heavy go-bag in a wide arc, catching him squarely on the side of the head. He grunted, his eyes glazing over. He fell against the bookshelf, sending a cascade of heavy volumes to the floor. People were screaming now, scrambling away. Rostova didn't hesitate. She pulled her Glock and trained it on him. "NYPD, don't move." Silas, dazed and disoriented, slowly raised his hands. From the inner pocket of his tweed jacket, a small, metallic object slipped out and clattered onto the table. It was no bigger than a deck of cards, a sleek, silver casing with a single pulsing blue light at its center. The prototype. Campus security arrived seconds later, followed by patrol cars. Rostova kept her weapon trained on Silas as they took him into custody. She watched them cuff the man who had haunted her for days, the man who had haunted the city for 20 years. Later, as she gave her statement, she held the evidence bag containing the prototype. It was cool to the touch. The case of the Courier's last ride was over. She had found the killer, uncovered the motive, and recovered the prize. But as she looked at the pulsing blue light, she knew she had also uncovered something else. A secret so powerful, men would kill for it. A secret that would not stay buried. The ghost of Leo Martinez was finally at peace. The ghost of the briefcase she suspected was just beginning to stir.